Bill and Kelly Show is recorded at Studio A at Executive Suite Squared in beautiful Hammond, Indiana. Now, here's Bill and Kelly. Good morning and welcome to the Bill and Kelly Show. With us today via phone, since we had some issues with Zoom, our friend Zoom, are the Porter County Sheriff David Reynolds and the Porter County Prosecutor Gary Germann. Welcome to our show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good morning, Bill.
We're sorry that we can't see your cheery faces on the TV tube, if you will, but we'll have to make go with, as you know, technology is always a wondrous thing. So I got to say, we are very honored to have you both on, and I have to apologize to both our listeners and to you both for our technical difficulties that we had last time, but we'll make a go at it now. Gentlemen, what I'd like to first off discuss with you both, with everything that has been going on in these trying times, and my goodness, we have seen it all. One of the things that I know we would like to call back to and discuss, an ongoing problem in Porter County that both of you have been really combating before the whole pandemic and this relationship with Black Lives Matter protest in the area. And I'd like to talk about the substance abuse problem that you both have been engaged with extremely from the legal aspect and law enforcement aspect. And Gary, I'd like to start off with you and talk to you about what you are seeing as far as, and what your engagement is as far as the numbers with the substance abuse problem in Porter County. And before we start, I'd like to call back, with the regards to the pandemic, I think we're seeing a level of deaths increase in Porter County, but the last time I checked, back in 2018, which we had the last numbers I could obtain from drug overdose deaths, in comparison to this year, those deaths are running nose and nose with the COVID-19 deaths in the county. So, but the thing about it is, obviously, with the media covering COVID pandemic and with the lockdown order, and obviously it's received far, far more attention, but that's not to say we don't have another problem. So, Gary, if you could speak to us about that and what you're seeing as far as the prosecutor is concerned, prosecutor's office, and some of the numbers that you're still seeing.
Yes, Bill. What I don't have before me are the actual number of overdose and overdose deaths. Although I can, just from our caseload, I can tell you that the overdoses are up. And I think the sheriff probably has, at least from the jail, those numbers as well, or at least something that would indicate that trend. But we're seeing not only just overdoses from heroin, but meth overdoses, and of course the dangerous fentanyl seems to be more and more prevalent.
So that is not stopped whatsoever. We're still seeing an uptick in those deaths.
Yeah, I would say so. And although the cost may have gone up, for whatever reason, people still have access to those kinds of drugs, that level of desperation and caused by the addiction. But we're still seeing it, and it's still a huge problem, obviously.
Now, that is from the death standpoint. What about as far as prosecution and as far as the law, the number of drug deals, so to speak, going on in the county? Is that those numbers changing at all, remaining the same, going up?
I would say the numbers are probably going up. I think our drug task force, as far as I can tell, they just keep getting better and better, and they're just doing a fantastic job. So it's both the users and the dealers, and that activity, I would say, just generally is up just a little bit.
All right. Yeah, and so, Dave, as far as the programs that you have in the jail, and as far as what you're seeing as the county's law enforcement, what are you seeing?
Well, I do have the numbers that Gary talked about. Just to give perspective, the first 6 months in 2019, last year, we had 29 overdoses, 3 deaths. So the first 6 months of 2020, our overdoses are at 41. So we've had more overdoses, and we've had 9 deaths. So we've had 3 times as many deaths. So, I mean, I really don't. We thought we saw a little bit of a decline when the pandemic really started hitting, but then the numbers, the overdoses still continued. So obviously, I think we all can make a fair assessment that the pandemic has had no influence on heroin use, and you can see that in the courts, see it in our jail. I mean, obviously, the pandemic has really kind of changed how we operate the jail. We do quarantine. We quarantine every person arrested, and that person will be quarantined if he doesn't bond out for 14 days. And currently, we have no infections in our jail. But when it hit, it went up to, we had 43 total infections. Asymptomatic, a few symptomatic, and we found out later that it had nothing to do with any of the arrested people. It was a person that was in our kitchen that was sick, and we didn't know it, and all of our inmate workers were tested positive. So we were under the gun there for a while, but we mitigated it and we controlled it. And right now we're doing pretty good with how we operate. Everyone wears a mask. We have no contact. Right now we don't have anybody coming in our jail outside of arrested people and our employees. That will probably change shortly with our programs because we've kind of discontinued all our programs. But we are now contemplating on starting that up in the next week or two.
And thank you for making that statement, Dave, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you about, how the pandemic has affected the jail and all the programs that you've put into jail. And Jay Berkey has done a marvelous job overseeing is the programs that you put in jail to oversee the various different problems in Porter County, and the one we're talking about, substance abuse. So you see that coming back here shortly then?
Yeah, we're talking about starting it, I think, in the next week. Our programs will continue. The God Pod is another a question because we have a lot of people coming in from the outside that help us put these programs on. So we're not saying we're not going to do it, but they'll have to have, obviously, their temperature taken, and we'll have to monitor it. We may even test them before they come in. So, you know, we're a big advocate of testing. Contrary to what you hear on the TV, you have to test.
Right.
Because if you don't test, you're not going to know. And although you could go, if you don't test, you won't have any positives. So that's, I guess, one way of looking at it. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to determine what our problem is. And on a lighter note, we have tested all of our employees twice, and we have no road officers that have tested positive. We've had 4 jailers that have tested positive, but that was about 2 months ago, and they're fine now. So, I mean, people need to understand that the problem here is asymptomatic. You have people that have no symptoms that are contagious. So we're not experts at this, but we know now the CDC, they keep changing the game plan on what you can and what you can't do, which makes it difficult for us. But we're basically operating on the side of caution and we're testing whenever there's a doubt, we test. And it seems like it's been it's worked out well for us.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and we have to say, without testing, you don't know what you're dealing with, and in that controlled environment where you have contained atmosphere where people are, obviously. Now, what about face masks and things of that nature for the inmates? Are you making, what type of caution does that look like in the jail?
Yeah, we actually bought a fabric mask for the inmates that you can wash. It's a little more comfortable. Whether they wear them or not, I mean, the thing is, if we know they're not sick, and there's they're not getting any outside influence at all. So, but it's up to them if they want to wear them. All the attorneys are using video, and it works. So, and they've been. I can't say enough about the criminal justice system in itself in Porter County. They've all stepped up, from the judges, the prosecutor's office, especially probation, because 70% of our inmates are in there for violation of probation. Right. So they could have really kind of threw a monkey wrench in this whole thing, but they really adjusted how they operate. And I think a lot of it is we've all learned things, and maybe we'll do things different. Probation may do things different on violations. We know that we will probably keep this quarantine procedure probably forever. We like the fact that we quarantine everybody, because if you think about it, in the fall, hopefully we get through with this pandemic stuff. But then you got influenza A that comes in. You got people that come in sick. By quarantining them, we have a better handle on everyone. And we also control their behavior at the beginning. I mean, you're basically in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. So they want to go along with the program when it's over.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Now, Gary, why don't you give us a perspective from the court system in Porter County and from the prosecutor's office? What has the pandemic done to your operations and the court system?
Well, like the sheriff's department, we were all tested. Everybody in our office, everybody in the courthouse was tested, and none of us were positive. Every morning when we come to work, we have a form to fill out, and our temperatures are taken. So if anybody is sick, they are automatically sent home. There for a while, in fact, I think still, Dave, every inmate that's in custody, we do his hearing by video. Yes. In all of the courts, so that there's no exposure there. We've only been really reopened for 2 weeks, and prior to that, there were no hearings other than those that were really mandated, and those were with our inmates. They were at the jail, and those were all done by video. So it really slowed us down in handling and resolving our cases. So that has just started to pick up within the last couple weeks. I do a court call in Judge Bradford's court, and we're just slammed down there. Right now, typically, court calls would be set at 9 o'clock in the morning. They are now set at 9, 10, and 11, and the cases are then divided up into thirds. All the courtrooms have been sort of self-quarantine. In other words, there are specific places for everyone to sit, and everyone is required to wear a mask. The judge, the lawyers, court reporters, everyone. That area in the courtroom is considered a common area, so face masks are required. When one group of the defendants leaves the courtroom, someone will sanitize those places. Where the defense lawyers sit, that table, as one changes in and out, that is also sanitized. So lots of huge changes. I think the other thing that we've been really affected by is the Indiana Supreme Court has issued an order that precludes any jury trial from taking place until at least August 15th. So we are really scheduling trials now into September, October, November. I got a trial date the other day that isn't until February. So that's how backed up we are. We have some serious cases that we're going to try, and we're still trying to figure out how to do that. Are jurors going to be required to wear face masks? What are the social distancing rules going to be? How are we going to handle jury deliberations? Just all kinds of things that we still have to address.
So not that your jobs were not difficult before the pandemic, this adds a whole new layer onto criminal justice and law enforcement who plans for this. So Gary, go ahead, Gary.
It does, and we, I still want to encourage the people who do get a call for jury service to come. Don't be afraid, because by that time we'll have measures in place, and I would imagine we'll take everyone's temperature and ask questions about whether they've been sick, exposed to someone with COVID, that type of thing. But we will make it work. So I just encourage people, if they get the notice for jury trial, just come on down, give it a shot.
All right, and one question I have to ask: have you had any issues with inmates or people who are going to be indicted? About the length of time that this is imposed on their justice, their day in court, so to speak. Are there any of those concerns?
There are not that I know of. There was one speedy trial request, and so that case we were able to resolve that favorably. Other than that, I don't think so. If there were any real problems, then the lawyers were asking that their clients be released on pretrial supervision, some real intense, and in some cases the judges granted those motions, and in some cases they did not.
All right. So that's interesting. Now, so really there hasn't been anyone challenging this because of the amount of time that they've been. So all the most of these people, do they remain incarcerated until their trial date, or are they bailed out, or what
yes,
is?
And thanks to the sheriff, I think we're at a point, and what Dave says is true. The people that are in jail are the ones that should be there anyway. I think we do a really good job of funneling nonviolent offenders to pretrial services. And I'm glad to hear the jail programs are starting again, because I miss those. I miss those as a tool that I can use with our overdose cases, nonviolent offenders, to funnel them into the really good substance abuse programs that I have at the jail. Plus, Dave, I miss coming to the graduations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that we're talking about some very innovative programs in the Porter County Jail, developed by necessity, but I mean they've received national attention thanks to David Reynolds and Jay Berkey, who have instituted some amazing programs, and I've witnessed some of those myself at invite by Sheriff Reynolds, and thank you for doing that. That was an enlightening experience.
I don't know, Bill, that people really know how cutting edge Dave Reynolds' programs have been at the jail. I think this Porter County Jail is being a model that's being used across the country now for the nonviolent offenders.
Yeah, definitely. And Jay Berkey, who we've had on the program, is an awesome, amazing. And by the way, David, you'll pass along our regards to Jay. We miss him dearly. Can't wait to get him back on the show again. But they are quite and just the environment within the Porter County Jail. When Dave invited us out to do a tour and witness one of the programs, it was like going through Mayberry. Is the best thing. It really is. I mean, the sheriff's on first name basis, at least with the inmates that I saw interact with them, and it's just almost like a father-son, daughter type relationship. It was just something that I've never, it was kind of refreshing to see. But hats off to both of you with that regard. And I really want to honor your time, and I really feel embarrassed that we've had difficulty with Zoom this morning. And I know Sheriff Reynolds has an appointment coming up. But I want to jump quickly into another issue that has come up that has grabbed a lot of attention, and that is the Black Lives Matter. And just the horrendous incidents that have happened that has brought this about. And without discussing in detail, because I'll leave that up to other media sources to do that. That's not in our wheelhouse, so to speak. But one of the things that it does, really has our concern is, and this is more directed at Sheriff Reynolds, is what has this done, or I guess from your perspective, what has this done with regard to the relationship between the community and law enforcement? You can speak to that for just a bit.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I talked to a assistant U.S. attorney last week because we're trying to put together statistics throughout the state regarding use of force, violation of civil rights, and because we're meeting with legislators and we had a phone call last week, we're having one this week, just to figure out where we're at in Indiana and what potential police reforms do we need. And but from Porter County's perspective, we've had 4 protests. All of them have been very peaceful. They've been very engaging. I mean, they contacted myself and Chief Ballin and Chief Candiano, and they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I think they have a right to protest. No one has an issue with that. The problem is the outside influence sometimes comes in that they or we can't control, and then you have problems. That's what happened in Fort Wayne. That's what happened in Indianapolis. So we were prepared for that, but it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So, I just don't have a real negative feeling of how people think. I think you kind of look at what's concerning. You pertain to what's around you in your own community. There's no question that what happened in Minneapolis was not right. Whether it was a training issue, whether it was a hiring issue, I mean, things like that happened there, we don't do here. We don't do it anywhere in Indiana. We don't have any need a neck restraint. And it was even in their policy. So obviously they have issues. Right. But because they have issues, does that necessarily mean that we have issues? And I think that's what we're trying to get our head around right now is I'm not saying we're perfect and we can't improve what we do, but we do in Indiana. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the 92 sheriffs. They keep things together in their counties, and they take use of force in violation of civil rights very seriously. Whether it's white, black, brown, it don't make any difference. I mean, the law is the law, and police aren't above it. So that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to figure out, do we have a problem, and then identify that and do something, and then we'll take the next step. There's things that we are looking at as far as hiring, backgrounds, being more open and transparent. But I said, like in the last call we had last week with the legislators in the Porter County Sheriff's Office, we have body cameras and we have car cameras. So, I mean, I just say that, hey, we are trying to be as transparent and as open as possible, and I don't see how you can be any more transparent. Every time we have a contact with the public, it's recorded. That's what I'm basically promoting, that all law enforcement in Indiana should have body cameras and car cameras. Now there's a price to that. So the legislators right now are working with the governor, possibly, of funding some of that, if not all of it. And if they did that, then I think that would be unprecedented in the United States, that where you have you have a state that's advocating body cameras and car cameras.
Right. And you touched upon something, Dave, that makes a great deal of sense, that, that you guys you don't have those policies. And not only that, I guess I'm very fortunate to know some of your guys and some other law enforcement individuals in the area, and they're just aghast. It's like their training that they go to, they just are amazed. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's something that it's an issue elsewhere, but unfortunately, as those issues happen elsewhere, you've got to agree they affect everybody as far as perception, and that's really where the question came from, is the perception you're now having to deal with, which affects everyone. Now, Gary, this one is kind of directed at you. It comes from a legal aspect. Now, Kelly and I actually covered some of these, and the police officers did a remarkable job. And there was, and as Dave said, there were no issues. There were really there's some heckling issues, but they were minor, if anything. But the latest one that we did attend, which was the one in Chesterton over the weekend, really wasn't a protest per se, but it was the Juneteenth observation or solidarity walk. One interesting thing that I noticed the Chesterton police did is they blocked off every intersection where the march was going to take place. Because there are some people that the armed protesters, and this is, if you'll bear with me, what I'm going to get at, there were some social media posts from people wanting to protest that their Second Amendment rights being violated, which to me I'm not sure why they intertwine. But in Crown Point, as we all know, that some armed protesters showed up at a march and kind of intimidating. So, Gary, I've got to ask this question. Does any of these armed protesters showing up at the Black Lives Matter or the Juneteenth rallies, if you will, are any of those, can they be bridged over to like a state statute as far as dealing with intimidation? Can any of them be held accountable for creating an intimidating environment, or is that not the case?
I would say with just that alone, that is not a crime, as long as obviously they're licensed to carry the weapons that they're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
So the mere presence of a weapon on you is not a crime. It's not considered intimidation. On the other hand, if the threat can be expressed or implied. So depending on what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're acting, that might at some point end up to be the crime of intimidation. But just from what you said, I'm going to say no. That doesn't mean it's a good idea to do that. People do react to that, rightly or wrongly. But I don't know if the sheriff would agree, but I do not consider that in and of itself a crime.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I'm not real comfortable with that situation, them having guns. I mean, I just heard that they're bringing guns out on the National Lake Shore. I mean, to me, that kind of raises a red flag. Why do you need a gun to go to the beach? But you also have to understand and be cognizant of what the law is. And but it's something that's from a law enforcement perspective that it has to be on our radar. And it has to be closely monitored.
Right. Again, I just want to bring that up, and no opinion, obviously, from either perspective. They are guarded with their rights, Second Amendment rights, but then the question does get asked whether the intimidation is. So that was interesting, and boy, I tell you what, I will start wrapping things up because I know I'm dealing with two of the busiest people in Indiana, let alone Northwest Indiana. We respect that. So, boy, I cannot tell you how honored we were to have you on the show, and we want to thank you both again repeatedly, and again apologize for the technical issues. And maybe someday when all this pandemic is over, we can have you in the studio and actually have an old school type of interview. We would much appreciate that. But in the meantime, I will let both you go and get to beyond the most important business of keeping Porter County citizens safe. And do any of you want to end with a statement before we go? Dave?
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to going to your studio. I mean, whenever you want to do it, just give me a call.
It's a beautiful place. It's we're blessed to have this place. Gary?
Yeah, I agree. I just think the more access that people have in our community to me, to our office, and to the sheriff's office and law enforcement, the better it's going to be in the long run. So I'm available whenever you want to do it, Bill.
We appreciate that, and I want to tell you both, being a Porter County resident, and my grandchildren and my children are all Porter County residents. We feel all that much safer that you two gentlemen have the seats that you have in Porter County. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of both political parties. We are very honored to have you serve in your positions.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Really, it's my pleasure. I always tell people, Bill, I love my job. I love the people that I work with. It's just the best thing.
By the way, just Gary, just on a note, and I think I've electronically introduced you to Frank Marvan, our new Democratic congressional candidate. I saw him stream live that he was playing basketball. I would encourage you to maybe challenge him, pickup game.
Oh, I'd love to do it. I think he's younger than I am, Bill.
Oh, Gary, do not bring age into this. You know that does not matter with you. Why do you do that?
I'm just trying to get a handicap.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize money had anything to do with it anymore. So we'll listen with that before some other raised eyebrows out there. So listen, both you gentlemen, have a wonderful day. Again, we appreciate your time. And ladies and gentlemen out there, we wish you a beautiful day. And we'll say goodbye for now.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Tiger Plumbing. Whether you need to replace a faucet, overhaul your sump pump, or desludge your drains, call Tiger Plumbing. In today's world, knowing who's at your door is important. Tiger Plumbing sends you your technician's photo, estimated time of arrival, and a little bit about him or her. Hey, Sam likes fishing and camping. Cool.